most important thing for me is now when the transfer market closed, that everyone is 100% committed with this club and with this team, and this is the most important thing for us. No egos, because the egos kills every success. And I think last season we played as a team, as one unit, and we have to go back like this.
So here's the papers from Sport. Egos kill success, something that Hansi Flick has said there. Sid Lowe's still with us. What's he actually talking about here, Sid? Do we know?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, by the way, that Hansi Flick offers this up. Nobody has asked him this question. Nobody had suggested that there was a problem with egos. He's the one that puts this, if you like, into the public domain. I think if you listen to what he's saying, he's talking at that point about wanting the transfer window to close, and he's been very, very conscious that there was a risk of losing players, Casado and Fermin. And in part, the context to his answer is about players wanting to go and players maybe believing that they deserve a bigger role. And so that's partly looking at Fermin, it's partly looking at Casado, it's partly looking at, I suppose, across the midfield, at Gavi as well, because he's got a lot of midfielders who know that they won't necessarily get full minutes. But obviously this then gets extrapolated, and you start looking at the players. Who are those players that, in theory at least, would have an ego? Who are those players that would see themselves as the stars? And of course, everybody immediately turns to Lamine Yamal. And they turn to Lamine Yamal. Why? Because this is an 18-year-old kid who's already being talked about as the best player in the world. It's an 18-year-old kid who this year has been celebrating goals by putting the crown on his head. And I suppose in that sense, it's inevitable that people kind of see the ego side of things through him. But it was interesting because Lamine Yamal was asked directly about what his manager said. And he said, no, I don't think he's talking about egos in terms of individuals. I think he's talking about us not having the structure right, not having the effort right. And so Hansi Flick hasn't told us who he's talking about, but I think it's too easy to fall into the trap of assuming that he's talking about the big names. I think he's talking about something much more, how would I put this, much more generalised, about players within the team being aware that it's about the team. And I think that has been seen through the prism of the transfer window and potential departures. And I think more than anything else, Hansi Flick is delighted that the transfer window is open and delighted that no one's gone, and is now in a position where for the next 4 months he can say, well, 3.5 months, he can say, that's it. We've only got one thing in mind now. It's not the future, it's not going somewhere else, it's winning and playing for Barcelona.
Well, it's not, I understand maybe he's seeing things behind the scenes as managers do. Yep. But it's not egos that where they've lost the goals to Levante, the goals to Rayo this season. It's not egos. It's just a bad defensive units. Now, he made 2 changes against Rayo Vallecano in personnel. Koundé came in, Eric Garcia moved to centre-back, Christensen came in. So he shuffled the pack again, and it got worse. They got worse, albeit they were playing a better team in Rayo Vallecano than Levante, as you said, newly promoted. Rayo Vallecano, and Sid and I were covering the game, they were excellent. And we did a little piece a couple of days ago on the analysis of their defensive unit, and it was a shambles. I mean, there's leaving space behind, and then there's basically having your toes on the halfway line, which is where they had it. So I get it. Maybe there's a couple of big heads in there who maybe need a little slap down, but that's not his biggest problem at the moment. His biggest problem is they have been so easy to play against, particularly defensively, that he's going to have to figure that out. And we touched on it a couple of days ago on the show with Stewart Robson. The big question mark is going to be, it worked great for them last year. They won everything apart from the Champions League, but has it got longevity to keep taking that many risks? And actually, we were talking about this, Sid. I think it was you interviewed Frankie de Jong after that Vallecano game, is that right? He said something very interesting when you asked him about
that's right, yeah.
He says something very interesting when you asked him about VAR. He says, yeah, it was a problem for us, and I'm paraphrasing, it was a problem for us because our offside trap is so risky that we generally catch people off by inches. And so we need VAR to make sure we're getting these decisions right. And I was kind of aghast thinking, that's how risky they are taking this. That the players are thinking, well, we need VAR to be working, because yeah, we catch people offside sometimes by 4 or 5 yards, but quite a lot of time, if you watch these Barca games, they're catching them off by a foot and a toe. And I thought that was a very interesting comment that he made to Sid at the weekend.
And actually, what he's coming out with there will affect that line as well. You know, when he's talking about, he clearly smells something going on with the Eagles. And when players start playing for themselves and stop doing that extra yard for the next guy, all that comes into play when you're playing such a high line. Because if you, as a unit, don't close the ball down properly, and there's one guy or two guys not doing it properly, that means the man on the ball has the time to stick it in behind. So all of these things come together. It's not watching the game, you can't really turn around and say, well, yeah, you can see he's not trying hard enough or he is, but when you're sat on the side and when you know your players, you can smell who's doing the extra yard and who's not. I think that's what he's talking about.
Is that something that stood out to you as well, Sid, with Frankie de Jong in that interview?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. Just very briefly pick up on what Steve's talking about. There was a moment last year, and I apologise because I can't remember exactly when it was now, that Hansi Flick talked about precisely that. That it's all well and good talking about the defensive line, but the pressure has to be really, really good all around the pitch so that the other team hasn't got time to look for the pass and time the pass. So they're having to play that pass under pressure all the time, and therefore the timing of the defensive line means you catch them offside and it's all cleared up. In terms of the Frankie de Jong thing, I think that tallies with something else as well, which is that Frankie's talking about the fine margins there, and that playing with the VAR means that you can risk those fine margins, because if you trust yourself to get it right, you've got to be able to trust the system, in other words, the refereeing system, to get it right as well. And of course, if you haven't got VAR, maybe you don't risk it. But here's the thing, those margins are very, very narrow. And I don't want to labour this point, but we talked about this a little bit on the weekend after the Rayo Vallecano game. I think we may even have talked about it going up into the Rayo Vallecano game as well, which is that Flick is not yet sure about his best central defensive partnership. Why? Because last year he came to be sure of it. Now, it didn't start the way he intended, and it started because Ronald Araujo got an injury. But he had Kubasi and he had Inigo Martinez. And Inigo Martinez was the defender that, if you like, led the rest of the line and led the timing of stepping that line out, which of course is has to be really, really good, has to be really, really precise. And he's found that without Inigo Martinez, who's gone to Saudi Arabia, and he wasn't expecting this, Inigo actually stopped him on the flight on the way back from, where were they, in Japan I think it was, and said, look, I'm going because this offer, I just can't turn it down. And so then he's put in a position where he says, okay, so who's my partner for Kubasi? But even then he's not sure that it quite works, because Araujo has amazing recovery speed but doesn't time the line as well. He's tried Eric Garcia at full-back, but at the weekend pulled him into centre-back, thinking maybe he can step up the line with Christensen, because maybe I'm not sure that Kubasi is the one to do it. And so he's still not in a position where he knows for sure who he wants his two centre-backs to be. And it's really important, this. It's not about whether he thinks Eric Garcia is better, or Christensen is better, or Araujo is better, or Kubasi is better. It's about how he thinks that line will get its timing right. And he's lost the player that led that line last year, and I think that's really, really significant.
Oh, Barcelona fans, every time every time that FC crew come on here talking about Barcelona, they can't get through a show without talking about the high line. But it is so blindingly obvious, and sometimes last year it worked great. It did. Much to the scratching of the head of a few of us, we were saying, why are the other teams, and I know there was a little bit of pressure on the ball, but the Bayern Munichs and the Real Madrids and others really should have done a better job of getting in behind. Raya did a great job at the weekend. Easy Palazon in particular with some of those passes, and but for Garcia having a great game, they're losing that by 3 or 4. So it is a talking point, and I dare say at the moment is his biggest headache after this international break, is that, as Sid mentioned, is personnel, and also he hasn't got time. It's not like he's got 2 weeks now to go and work with them, squeezing up, dropping off, squeezing up, because most of them are away. So they all come back, he's got to shuffle the pack again, and hopefully they've got enough time to work on it. But I think what we do know, it's not going away. It's not changing. If it doesn't work one week, he's not going to not do it the next week. He's just going to try and make sure they do it better the next week. And we'll see if that is going to be the case.
Yes, we will. He's got some thinking to do over this international break. And then Barcelona are back in action against Valencia on September 14th. Real Madrid, one of the teams that are perfect so far, they'll be up against Real Sociedad. Same can be said for Athletic Club. They're up against Alaves. All of these games available on ESPN+. Atleti still looking for their first win.